The morning sun cast long shadows across the palace grounds as Detective Sarah Mitchell walked through the grand entrance. She had been called to investigate what officials were calling an unfortunate accident, but something in the phone call suggested there was more to the story. The Queen had passed away 3 days ago, and now there were whispers of documents being destroyed and a royal guard in the hospital. Sarah had worked many cases involving the wealthy and powerful, but never anything connected to the royal family. As she approached the private wing of the palace, she noticed the unusual number of security personnel stationed at every corner. Their faces were tense and they avoided making eye contact with her. Lady Margaret Thornfield, the Queen's longtime personal secretary, met Sarah at the entrance to the Queen's private chambers. Margaret was a woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun and worry lines etched deep around her eyes. She had served the royal family for over 30 years and had never seen anything like what happened 3 nights ago. "Detective Mitchell, thank you for coming so quickly," Margaret said, her voice shaking slightly. "I must warn you, what you're about to see is quite disturbing. The Queen's study has been completely destroyed." As they walked down the ornate hallway lined with portraits of past monarchs, Margaret explained what she knew. "I was working late that evening organizing the Queen's papers as requested. Her Majesty had been very specific about which documents needed to be preserved and which should be handled with extreme care. She seemed worried about something in the weeks before she passed." They stopped outside a heavy wooden door marked with the royal crest. Margaret pulled out an old brass key and turned it slowly. "The Queen gave me specific instructions about these rooms. She said that if anything ever happened to her, I should immediately secure certain documents and contact only trusted individuals." The smell hit Sarah first, a mixture of burnt paper, melted plastic, and something else she couldn't identify. As Margaret pushed open the door, Sarah gasped at the destruction before them. What had once been an elegant study was now a scene of chaos. Ash covered every surface, and the remains of filing cabinets stood twisted and blackened against the far wall. "This is where we found Officer James Crawford," Margaret said, pointing to a spot near the window. "He's been the Queen's personal guard for 8 years. Everyone trusts him completely. When the fire alarm went off that night, he was the first to respond." Sarah walked carefully through the debris, taking photographs and making notes. The fire had been intense but strangely contained to this one room. "Tell me exactly what happened that night," she said, kneeling down to examine what appeared to be the remains of a large safe. Margaret wrung her hands nervously. "I was in my office down the hall when I heard shouting. At first I thought it was just the television in the Queen's sitting room. But then I smelled smoke. By the time I reached this room, the entire study was engulfed in flames. And Officer Crawford? James was unconscious on the floor. There was blood on his head and his uniform was singed. The paramedics said he had suffered a severe concussion. He's been in and out of consciousness for 3 days now." Sarah noticed something glinting in the ash near where the guard had been found. Using her tweezers, she carefully extracted what appeared to be a small piece of jewelry, a gold cufflink with an unusual design. It wasn't something that would belong to the Queen or her personal guard. "Margaret, you mentioned the Queen was worried about something. Can you tell me more about that?" The older woman looked around nervously, as if checking to make sure they were alone. "In the weeks before she died, Her Majesty had been receiving visitors at unusual hours. People I didn't recognize. She would meet with them privately and always seemed agitated afterward. Do you know who these visitors were?" "I only saw one clearly. A tall man with dark hair and expensive clothing. He came 3 times in the last month. The Queen always dismissed all staff when he arrived, which was very unusual. She never sent everyone away, not even for the most sensitive meetings." Sarah made a note about the mysterious visitor. "What about the documents that were destroyed? Do you know what they contained?" Margaret's face grew even more worried. "That's what troubles me most, Detective." The Queen had been gathering old files from various sources. Some of them went back decades. She had me contact lawyers, banks, even some government offices to retrieve records that had been stored away. "What kind of records?" "Financial documents, correspondence, even some medical files. I didn't read them. It wasn't my place. But I could see dates going back to the 1970s and 1980s. Whatever she was researching, it was something from long ago." As Sarah continued to examine the room, she noticed that while most everything had been destroyed, There were signs that someone had been selective about what burned. Certain areas of the room showed evidence of accelerant being used, while others had been left relatively untouched. Margaret, I need to ask you something important. Is it possible that someone other than Officer Crawford was in this room that night? The secretary hesitated. I thought I heard voices before the fire started, but with all the chaos, I can't be certain. Sarah found this detail particularly interesting. If there had been other people in the room, it would change everything about the case. Think carefully. How many voices did you hear? At least 2, maybe 3. One was definitely a woman's voice, raised and angry. The others were men. But detective, there's something else you should know. Margaret led Sarah to a small adjoining room that had escaped the fire damage. This is where the Queen kept her most personal items. The door was locked that night, and I found this the next morning. She handed Sarah a small notebook with a leather cover. The pages were filled with the Queen's handwriting, notes, dates, and names that seemed to span several decades. Sarah opened the notebook carefully. The entries were cryptic, but certain patterns emerged. There were repeated references to the arrangement, the payments, and keeping the secret. Most disturbing were the recent entries, which showed increasing concern about them finding out and protecting the family. Margaret, I need you to think very carefully about the night of the fire. Besides the voices, did you notice anything else unusual? Well, there was a car parked outside that I didn't recognize. A black sedan with tinted windows. It was there when I arrived that evening and gone by the time the fire department left. Sarah realized she was dealing with something much more complex than a simple accident. The combination of the mysterious visitors, the selective destruction of documents, the injured guard, and now evidence of multiple people being present, suggested a carefully planned operation. I'm going to need to speak with Officer Crawford as soon as he's able to communicate, Sarah said. In the meantime, I want you to think about anything else the Queen might have said or done in recent weeks that seemed out of character. As they prepared to leave the destroyed study, Sarah took one last look around. Somewhere in this mess of ash and debris were the answers to what had really happened that night. But more importantly, she was beginning to suspect that the Queen's death might not have been as natural as everyone believed. Sarah arrived at St. Mary's Hospital the following morning, hoping to finally speak with Officer James Crawford. The Royal Guard had regained consciousness during the night, though doctors warned that his memory might be affected by the concussion. As she walked through the sterile corridors, Sarah reviewed her notes from the previous day's investigation. The cufflink she had found was currently being analyzed by the forensics team, but initial examination revealed it was expensive and bore the initials RH, which didn't match anyone in the immediate royal household. More intriguingly, the hospital had reported that Crawford had been asking for someone named Anna repeatedly since waking up, though no one by that name was listed among his known contacts. Outside Crawford's room, Sarah met Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell, the physician overseeing his care. Officer Crawford is coherent, but he's been quite agitated, Dr. Hartwell explained. He keeps insisting that he needs to tell someone something important, but he becomes confused when we ask him to elaborate. Sarah entered the room to find Crawford sitting up in bed, his head wrapped in bandages. He was a man in his mid-30s with kind eyes that now held a look of deep concern. When he saw Sarah's detective badge, his expression became urgent. "Thank God someone's finally here," Crawford said, gripping the bed rails. "Detective, you have to listen to me. What happened that night, it wasn't an accident. Someone wanted those documents destroyed, and they were willing to kill for them." Sarah pulled out her notebook and sat down beside the bed. "James, I need you to tell me everything you remember from that night." "Start from the beginning." Crawford closed his eyes, concentrating. "I was doing my usual rounds when I heard raised voices coming from the Queen's study. That was unusual because Her Majesty rarely had visitors that late. I approached the door to check, and that's when I heard her." "Her?" A woman's voice. She was angry, shouting about cleaning up the mess and making sure nothing could be traced back. I couldn't see who it was because the door was closed, but the voice was familiar somehow. Crawford paused, wincing as a wave of pain crossed his face. Then I heard the Queen respond. She sounded frightened, which was something I'd never heard before. Her Majesty was one of the strongest people I knew. What did the Queen say? She said something about having copies hidden away and that destroying the documents wouldn't solve anything. Then there was this other voice, a man's voice, telling her that she had brought this on herself by digging into the past. Sarah made careful notes. What happened next? I decided I needed to intervene. The Queen was clearly in distress, but as I reached for the door handle, someone grabbed me from behind. I tried to turn around, but something hit me hard on the head. The last thing I remember was falling and seeing flames starting to spread across the room. James, this is very important. Did you see who attacked you? Crawford shook his head slowly. It happened too fast. But I did notice something odd. When I was falling, I caught a glimpse of someone's shoes. Expensive women's shoes with a distinctive heel design. They weren't the kind of shoes a burglar would wear. This detail sent a chill through Sarah. If Crawford was right, they were dealing with someone who had access to the palace and was comfortable enough to wear formal attire while committing what amounted to assault and arson. You mentioned the name Anna when you first woke up. Who is Anna? Crawford's expression became even more troubled. Anna Whitmore. She used to work at the palace years ago as one of the Queen's ladies-in-waiting, but she left under strange circumstances about 15 years ago. The thing is, Detective, I think I saw her that night. Where did you see her? Earlier in the evening, before the incident in the study. I was checking the perimeter when I noticed a woman walking near the garden entrance. She was trying to stay in the shadows, but something about her walk seemed familiar. When she turned slightly, I could have sworn it was Anna. Sarah felt pieces of the puzzle beginning to form a picture. Why would Anna Whitmore want to destroy the Queen's documents? That's what's been bothering me since I woke up, Crawford said. Anna left the palace very suddenly. One day she was there, the next day she was gone. There were rumors at the time about some kind of scandal, but no one ever talked about it openly. Dr. Hartwell knocked on the door and entered. I'm sorry, Detective, but Officer Crawford needs to rest. His brain is still healing. As Sarah prepared to leave, Crawford grabbed her arm. Detective, there's something else. In the days before the fire, the Queen had me escort her to a safety deposit box at the central bank. She went alone into the vault, but when she came out, she was carrying a thick envelope. She seemed very upset about whatever was inside. Did she say what it was? No, but she did say something that stuck with me. She said that some secrets are too dangerous to keep and too dangerous to reveal. She looked like she was carrying the weight of the world. After leaving the hospital, Sarah drove directly to the central bank. If the Queen had recently visited a safety deposit box, there would be records of the visit. The bank manager, Mr. Richardson, was initially reluctant to discuss royal business, but Sarah's detective credentials and the serious nature of the investigation persuaded him to cooperate. Her Majesty visited Box 247 just 5 days before her death, Richardson confirmed, checking his computer records. She had held that box for over 20 years, but this was only the second time she had accessed it in the past decade. What was the first time? About 6 months ago. She spent nearly an hour in the vault that day and requested additional security measures for the box. Sarah asked to see the vault area where the Queen's safety deposit box was located. As they walked through the secure area, Richardson explained the bank's procedures for high-profile clients. We maintain the highest level of discretion, of course, he said, but I did notice that Her Majesty seemed quite distressed during her last visit. She asked several questions about our document storage policies and whether we had any connections to government record-keeping systems. When they reached Box 247, Sarah was surprised to find it was one of the largest boxes available. Mr. Richardson, I'm going to need to obtain a warrant to examine the contents of this box. In the meantime, I need you to preserve everything exactly as it is. Of course, Detective, but I should mention that Her Majesty left specific instructions about the box. If anything happened to her, the contents were to be given to someone named Margaret Thornfield. Sarah realized that Lady Margaret had not mentioned this arrangement. Either she didn't know about it, or she was keeping this information from the investigation for reasons of her own. That evening, Sarah returned to her office to review all the evidence she had gathered. The case was becoming more complex by the hour. She had a royal guard who claimed to have witnessed a conspiracy, a missing former lady-in-waiting who might have been present at the scene, and now a safety deposit box that could contain crucial evidence. As she spread out her notes on the desk, Sarah began to see connections forming. The Queen had been researching something from decades past, something that involved financial records and correspondence. Anna Whitmore had left the palace under mysterious circumstances 15 years ago, and now, just days after the Queen's death, someone had orchestrated the destruction of her private documents. Sarah picked up the gold cufflink that forensics had returned. The initials RH were clearly engraved, and the style suggested it was custom-made. She made a note to run the initials against all palace personnel and royal family members, but she had a feeling this piece of jewelry belonged to someone outside the immediate royal circle. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Lady Margaret. "Detective Mitchell, I need to see you immediately." Margaret's voice was shaking. "I've found something that changes everything. Can you meet me at the palace tonight?" Sarah arrived at the palace that evening to find Lady Margaret waiting nervously in the main entrance hall. The older woman's usually composed demeanor had completely disappeared, and her hands trembled as she clutched a manila envelope to her chest. "Margaret, what's happened?" Sarah asked, noticing that the secretary kept glancing around as if afraid someone might be watching them. "I found these hidden in the Queen's bedroom," Margaret whispered, holding up the envelope. They were taped to the underside of her jewelry box. "Detective, I think the Queen knew she was in danger." Margaret led Sarah to a small private sitting room and carefully opened the envelope. Inside were photocopies of documents that appeared to be decades old, along with several photographs and a handwritten letter in the Queen's distinctive writing. "I discovered these when I was packing Her Majesty's personal belongings," Margaret explained. "The letter is addressed to me with instructions to give these documents to the police if anything suspicious happened to her." Sarah read the Queen's letter carefully. The elegant handwriting revealed a story that was both shocking and heartbreaking. "My dear Margaret, if you are reading this, then my fears have likely come true. For 25 years I have carried the burden of a terrible secret. In 1999 there was a scandal involving a member of the royal family and a young woman named Anna Whitmore. The incident was covered up to protect the monarchy, but Anna was paid a substantial sum of money and agreed to leave the country permanently." The letter continued. "Recently, I discovered that Anna had returned to England and was demanding additional money to maintain her silence. But the situation has become more complicated. The person involved in the original incident has gained significant political power and views Anna's return as a threat to their career. I believe they are planning to silence her permanently, and I fear I may also be seen as a liability." Sarah looked up at Margaret, who was watching her with wide, frightened eyes. "Margaret, did you know any of this?" "I suspected something had happened with Anna, but I never imagined it was this serious," Margaret replied. "The Queen had been receiving threatening phone calls in recent weeks. She tried to hide it, but I could see how frightened she was becoming." Sarah examined the photographs that had been included with the letter. They appeared to be surveillance photos showing Anna Whitmore meeting with various individuals, including one that made Sarah's blood run cold. In one of the pictures, Anna was clearly visible talking to a tall man with dark hair, the same mysterious visitor that Margaret had described seeing at the palace. "Margaret, look at this photograph. Is this the man who visited the Queen?" Margaret studied the picture and nodded grimly. "Yes, that's him. But, Detective, there's something else you need to know. I've seen him before years ago. He used to work for the government in some kind of security capacity." Sarah's mind raced as she considered the implications. If a government security official was involved in both the original cover-up and the current threats, the scope of the conspiracy was much larger than she had initially thought. "We need to examine the other documents," Sarah said, spreading out the photocopies on the table. The papers revealed a complex web of financial transactions dating back to 1999. Large sums of money had been transferred from various royal accounts to an offshore bank account registered to Anna Whitmore. But more disturbing were the recent documents showing that someone had been tracking Anna's movements and financial activities. "Look at this," Sarah pointed to a bank statement. "Someone has been monitoring every transaction Anna made since she returned to England. They knew exactly where she was staying and what she was doing." Margaret gasped as she read over Sarah's shoulder. That means they were planning something for a long time. Among the documents was a medical report that sent chills through both women. It detailed injuries consistent with assault, dated from 1999, with Anna Whitmore listed as the patient. The report had been signed by Dr. Richard Henley, whose initials matched the cufflinks Sarah had found in the burned study. "Margaret, I think Dr. Henley was the one who examined Anna after the original incident. His presence at the palace the night of the fire suggests he's directly involved in the current situation." Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Stop investigating or you'll end up like the Queen. Both women stared at the threatening message. Margaret became visibly pale and began to shake. "Detective, I'm scared. If they're threatening you, what might they do to me?" Sarah tried to remain calm, but the threatening message confirmed her worst fears. "Margaret, I think you should stay somewhere safe tonight. Do you have family or friends outside the city where you could go?" Before Margaret could answer, they heard footsteps in the hallway outside the sitting room. Both women froze as the steps approached their door. "Quick, hide the documents," Sarah whispered, stuffing the papers back into the envelope. The door opened, and a palace security guard entered. Sarah recognized him as one of the officers she had seen during her first visit to investigate the fire. "Ladies, I'm sorry to disturb you, but we've had reports of unauthorized personnel in this wing of the palace," the guard said, though his eyes seemed to be scanning the room rather than looking at them directly. "We're just finishing up some administrative work related to the Queen's belongings," Margaret replied, trying to keep her voice steady. The guard stepped further into the room. "I'm going to need to ask you both to come with me for a security check." Sarah's detective instincts immediately told her something was wrong. Palace security wouldn't typically require a security check for the Queen's personal secretary and an investigating detective, especially not at this hour. "Officer, what's your name and badge number?" Sarah asked, reaching for her own identification. The guard hesitated for just a moment too long. "Officer Williams, badge 247. Sarah realized that he had given the same number as the Queen's safety deposit box, an unlikely coincidence. She also noticed that his uniform, while similar to the other palace guards, had subtle differences in the stitching and insignia. "I think there's been some misunderstanding," Sarah said, moving to position herself between the fake guard and Margaret. "We'll be happy to show our identification, but I'll need to verify your credentials first." The man's hand moved toward his belt, and Sarah saw the outline of a weapon. Without hesitation, she pushed Margaret behind a large armchair and shouted for her to call for help. "There's no need for anyone to get hurt," the fake guard said, drawing his weapon. "Just give me the envelope and everyone can walk away from this." Sarah realized that their conversation had been monitored somehow. Someone had been listening to everything they discussed, which meant the conspiracy reached even deeper into the palace security system than she had imagined. "Who sent you?" Sarah demanded while calculating her options for escape. "People who have a lot to lose if certain information becomes public," the man replied. "The same people who made sure the Queen's heart condition was properly managed." This statement hit Sarah like a physical blow. The man was strongly implying that the Queen's death had not been natural at all, but had been engineered to look like a heart attack. Margaret had managed to activate a panic button hidden behind the chair, and alarm bells began ringing throughout the palace. The fake guard realized his time was running out. "This isn't over," he said, backing toward the door. "You have no idea how powerful the people you're dealing with are." As he fled, Sarah helped Margaret to her feet. Both women were shaking, but they were alive and still had the crucial documents. "Margaret, we need to get these papers to a secure location immediately," Sarah said, "and we need to find Anna Whitmore before they do." After the terrifying encounter at the palace, Sarah knew she could no longer trust anyone within the royal security system. She arranged for Margaret to stay at a safe house while she focused on finding Anna Whitmore. The documents they had discovered provided crucial clues about Anna's identity and whereabouts. But Sarah realized she was racing against time. Using the financial records from the Queen's hidden envelope, Sarah traced Anna's recent activities. The bank statements showed regular withdrawals from an account linked to a small apartment building in a quiet neighborhood across town. If Anna was still alive, this was likely where she was hiding. Sarah decided to work alone, knowing that involving other police officers might alert the conspirators. As she drove through the city in the early morning hours, she reflected on everything she had learned. The original scandal in 1999 had involved a high-ranking government official who was now in a position of significant power. This person had paid Anna to disappear, but her recent return had triggered a deadly response. The apartment building was a modest 3-story structure with little security. Sarah parked down the street and observed the building for several minutes, looking for signs of surveillance or suspicious activity. When she was satisfied that no one was watching, she approached the building and found Anna's name listed as A. Wilson on apartment 2B. Sarah climbed the narrow staircase and knocked gently on the door. After a few moments, she heard movement inside and a nervous voice asking who was there. "Anna, my name is Detective Sarah Mitchell. I'm investigating what happened at the palace. I know you're in danger and I want to help." The door opened slightly, revealing a woman in her early 40s with shoulder-length brown hair and tired, frightened eyes. Anna Whitmore looked nothing like the confident young woman Sarah had seen in the old palace photographs. "How did you find me?" Anna asked, keeping the security chain attached. "The Queen left documents that led me here. Anna, I know about what happened in 1999, and I know that someone is trying to silence you. The Queen is dead and her guard was seriously injured. You could be next." Anna's face went pale. "The Queen is dead? When?" "5 days ago. Officially it was a heart attack, but I have reason to believe it was murder." Anna unlatched the security chain and opened the door fully. Her small apartment was neat but showed signs of someone preparing to leave quickly. Packed bags sat by the door, and important papers were organized on the kitchen table. "Detective, I never wanted any of this to happen," Anna said, gesturing for Sarah to sit down. "I just wanted to live quietly and forget about the past. But when my mother got sick last year, I had to come back to England to take care of her. Anna, I need you to tell me exactly what happened in 1999. Anna took a deep breath and sat down across from Sarah. "I was 22 and had been working as a lady-in-waiting for about 6 months. I loved my job and felt honored to serve the royal family. Then I was assigned to help with a private dinner party at one of the smaller royal residences." She paused, clearly struggling with painful memories. One of the guests was Robert Henley, Dr. Henley now, but back then he was a rising star in government security. He seemed charming and interested in my work. After dinner, he offered to show me some of the historical artifacts in the private collection. Sarah noticed Anna's hands were trembling as she continued her story. What started as a tour became something else entirely. Dr. Henley attacked me in one of the private rooms. When I tried to fight back, he became violent. I was badly hurt and managed to escape only because another staff member heard the commotion. "What happened after you reported the attack?" "That's when everything became a nightmare," Anna said, tears forming in her eyes. "I was told that reporting the incident would cause a major scandal that could damage the monarchy. Dr. Henley was working on sensitive government projects, and his career was considered too important to destroy." Anna stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street as if checking for threats. "I was offered a large sum of money to sign a confidentiality agreement and leave the country. They said it was the best solution for everyone. I was young and scared, and I thought I had no choice. But you came back. My mother was dying, and I needed to be here. I thought enough time had passed that no one would notice or care. But Dr. Henley had become very powerful. He's now the Director of National Security. When he learned I was back in England, he started threatening me." Sarah felt the pieces of the conspiracy falling into place. "Anna, did Dr. Henley contact you directly?" "No, he sent intermediaries. First, they offered me more money to leave again. When I refused, the threat started. They said they would destroy my reputation and make sure I could never find work anywhere." "What about the Queen? How did she become involved?" Anna's expression became sad and grateful at the same time. "Her Majesty contacted me about 2 months ago. She said she had been carrying guilt about what happened to me for 25 years. She wanted to make things right and was prepared to expose the truth, regardless of the consequences." "Is that why she was gathering old documents?" "Yes, the Queen had been collecting evidence of the cover-up, financial records, correspondence, medical reports. She wanted to build a complete case that would force the authorities to reopen the investigation." Sarah understood now why the Queen's study had been destroyed. Dr. Henley and his associates had been trying to eliminate all evidence of their crimes, both past and present. "Anna, the night of the fire at the palace, were you there?" Anna nodded reluctantly. "The Queen had asked me to meet her that evening. She wanted to give me copies of all the evidence she had gathered. But when I arrived, I could see that something was wrong. There were people at the palace who shouldn't have been there." "Did you see Dr. Henley?" "I saw him and 2 other men entering through a side entrance. I knew they weren't there for any legitimate reason. I tried to call the Queen to warn her, but her phone was going straight to voicemail." Anna walked back to the table and picked up one of the papers. "I managed to get inside through the staff entrance that I still knew how to access. But by the time I reached the Queen's study, the fire had already started. I could hear shouting and fighting inside, but the smoke was too thick to see anything clearly." "Why didn't you call for help?" "I was terrified. If Dr. Henley saw me there, I knew he would kill me. I hid in the garden until the fire department arrived. Then I slipped away in the confusion. Sarah realized that Anna was probably the source of the voices that Officer Crawford had heard. "Anna, I think the Queen may have been trying to protect you that night." The guard who was injured heard her saying that destroying the documents wouldn't solve anything because there were copies hidden elsewhere. "She was so brave," Anna said softly. "Even when she was in danger, she was still thinking about making sure the truth would come out." Sarah's phone buzzed with another threatening text message. "We know where you are. Stop now or face the consequences." Both women looked at the message with growing alarm. "Anna, we need to leave here immediately," Sarah said, standing up. "They've been tracking my movements, which means they probably know about this apartment." Anna grabbed her prepared bags while Sarah checked the street below. She could see a black sedan with tinted windows parked at the corner, the same type of vehicle that Margaret had noticed at the palace. "There's a back exit through the basement," Anna said. "It leads to the alley behind the building." As they prepared to escape, Sarah realized they needed a plan that would expose Dr. Henley and his conspirators while keeping Anna safe. The evidence they had was compelling, but they needed to find a way to present it publicly before their enemies could silence them permanently. Sarah and Anna escaped through the basement and made their way through the narrow alley behind the apartment building. Sarah's car was parked 2 blocks away, and they moved carefully through the early morning shadows, constantly checking for signs of pursuit. The black sedan remained at the corner, confirming Sarah's suspicions that they were being watched. "We need somewhere safe to plan our next move," Sarah said as they reached her car. "Somewhere Dr. Henley's people won't think to look." Anna suggested they go to her mother's old house in the suburbs. "It's been empty since she died last month. No one knows I still have the key." As they drove through the quiet streets, Sarah outlined her strategy. "We have strong evidence, but we need to present it in a way that can't be suppressed or covered up. If we go through normal police channels, Dr. Henley will use his government connections to bury everything. What do you suggest?" "We need to go public. The media, multiple news outlets simultaneously. Once the story is out there, it will be much harder for them to silence us." Anna's mother's house was a small cottage in a residential neighborhood far from the city center. As they settled in the modest living room, Sarah spread out all the evidence they had gathered: the Queen's documents, the financial records, the medical reports, and the photographs. "Anna, I need you to help me understand exactly how extensive this conspiracy is. Dr. Henley is the main figure, but he couldn't have organized all of this alone." Anna studied the photographs carefully. "I recognize some of these people. This man here was Dr. Henley's assistant back in 1999. He's the one who originally approached me with the money and the confidentiality agreement." She pointed to another figure in one of the surveillance photos. "And this woman, I think she works for the same government department. I saw her at my apartment building last week pretending to be a postal worker." Sarah realized they were dealing with a well-organized network of people willing to commit murder to protect their secrets. "Anna, we need to be very careful about who we trust. Dr. Henley has connections throughout the government and law enforcement. There is someone who might help us," Anna said thoughtfully. "Jonathan Pierce. He's an investigative journalist who has been writing about government corruption for years. He contacted me a few months ago because he was researching a story about cover-ups in the security services." Sarah remembered seeing Pierce's byline on several high-profile exposé articles. "Do you think we can trust him?" "I think so. He seemed genuinely interested in finding the truth, and he has a reputation for protecting his sources." Sarah made the decision to contact Pierce. Using Anna's phone to avoid detection, she called the journalist and arranged to meet him at a public location, a busy coffee shop in the city center where they would be safe from direct attack, but could easily spot surveillance. 2 hours later, Sarah and Anna sat across from Jonathan Pierce in the crowded cafe. Pierce was a man in his 40s with sharp, intelligent eyes and the slightly rumpled appearance of someone who spent most of his time chasing difficult stories. "What you're telling me is extraordinary," Pierce said after reviewing the documents they had brought. "If this is all true, we're talking about a conspiracy that goes to the very top of the security establishment. Can you help us get this story out?" Sarah asked. "Absolutely, but we need to be strategic about how we do it. Dr. Henley has the power to issue government censorship orders that could prevent publication. We need to coordinate with multiple news outlets and release everything simultaneously." Pierce explained his plan. He had contacts at 3 major newspapers and 2 television networks who could be trusted to run the story, despite government pressure. If we can get all 5 outlets to publish simultaneously, it will be impossible to suppress the story. How long will that take? Anna asked nervously. 24 hours, maybe less. I need to verify some of the documents and coordinate with my contacts. But ladies, you need to understand the danger you're in. Once the story breaks, Dr. Henley will have nothing left to lose. Sarah had been thinking about the same issue. Anna, after we release this information, you're going to need witness protection. Your testimony will be crucial for any criminal prosecution. As they prepared to leave the cafe, Pierce noticed something that made him tense. Don't look around, but there are 2 men at the table near the entrance who have been watching us since we arrived. They're trying to look casual, but they're clearly surveillance. Sarah casually glanced toward the entrance and confirmed Pierce's observation. The men were dressed as ordinary customers, but their positioning and behavior marked them as professionals. We need to leave separately, Sarah said. Jonathan, how quickly can you get started on the story? I'll begin immediately. Anna, I'm going to need you to go on record with your full account of what happened. Are you prepared to do that? Anna took a deep breath. Yes, it's time for the truth to come out. They arranged to meet later that evening at Pierce's office, which had security measures in place for protecting sensitive sources. Sarah and Anna left first, taking a circuitous route to ensure they weren't being followed. As they drove back toward the safe house, Sarah's phone rang. It was Lady Margaret, and she sounded panicked. Detective Mitchell, you need to know that Officer Crawford has disappeared from the hospital. The staff found his room empty this morning, and there are signs of a struggle. Sarah felt a chill of fear. Crawford was their key witness to what had happened the night of the fire. If Dr. Henley's people had taken him, their case would be significantly weakened. Margaret, where are you now? I'm still at the safe house you arranged, but I'm scared. There have been several cars driving by slowly, and I think they're looking for me. Sarah realized that all the witnesses were being systematically targeted. Margaret, pack only essential items and leave immediately. Go to the train station and buy a ticket to anywhere. Just get out of the city until this is over. After hanging up, Sarah turned to Anna. They're escalating their efforts to silence everyone involved. We may not have 24 hours. What do you mean? I think they're planning to eliminate all the witnesses before we can go public with the story. We need to move faster. Sarah called Jonathan Pierce and explained the new urgency. Jonathan, can you push your contacts to publish tonight instead of tomorrow? It's possible, but rushing could lead to mistakes. We need to be absolutely certain of our facts. I understand, but I think lives are at stake. Mine, Anna's, and possibly others. Pierce agreed to accelerate the timeline. Meet me at my office in 2 hours. I'll have my legal team standing by to review everything, and we'll push for publication by midnight. As Sarah and Anna prepared for what might be their final confrontation with Dr. Henley's conspiracy, they both understood that the next few hours would determine whether justice would prevail or whether the powerful would once again escape accountability for their crimes. Detective, Anna said as they approached Pierce's office building, whatever happens tonight, I want you to know that I'm grateful someone finally believed me and was willing to fight for the truth. Sarah squeezed Anna's hand reassuringly. The Queen believed you too, and she died trying to make sure your story would be told. We're going to honor her memory by seeing this through to the end. The newspaper office buzzed with urgent activity as Jonathan Pierce and his team worked through the evening to prepare the explosive story for publication. Sarah and Anna waited in a secure conference room, while lawyers reviewed documents and editors verified facts. The building's security had been quietly increased, though Pierce assured them that Dr. Henley's people would be unlikely to attack such a public location. At 9 p.m., Pierce received confirmation that all 5 news outlets were ready to publish simultaneously at midnight. We're coordinating the release across 3 different time zones to maximize impact, he explained. By morning, this story will be impossible to suppress. As they waited for the final hour, Sarah's phone rang with a call from an unknown number. Against her better judgment, she answered, Detective Mitchell, this is Dr. Robert Henley. The voice was calm and cultured, but Sarah could hear an underlying tension. I believe we need to talk. Dr. Henley, anything you want to say should be said through your lawyer after you're arrested. I think you misunderstand the situation. I have Officer Crawford with me, and he's very much looking forward to seeing you again. I also have some information about Lady Margaret that might interest you. Sarah's blood ran cold. She gestured for Pierce to start recording the call. What do you want? A simple exchange. You bring me all the documents you've collected, including anything the Queen may have hidden, and I'll return your friends unharmed. You have 1 hour to decide. And if I refuse, then Crawford and Margaret will unfortunately become victims of the same heart condition that affected Her Majesty. Modern medicine can be quite precise when administered by the right person. The call ended, leaving Sarah staring at her phone in horror. Dr. Henley had essentially confessed to murdering the Queen, while simultaneously threatening 2 more lives. "We recorded everything," Pierce said. "That's a clear confession to murder and kidnapping." Anna was pale with fear. "He's going to kill them no matter what you do. Once he has the documents, there will be no reason to keep any of us alive." Sarah knew Anna was right, but she couldn't abandon Crawford and Margaret. "Jonathan, continue with the publication plan. No matter what happens to me, this story needs to come out." "There has to be another way," Pierce insisted. "We could contact the police, the military, someone who isn't under Dr. Henley's influence. He's the director of national security. His influence reaches everywhere." Sarah paused, then had an idea. "Unless—" "Anna, you said the Queen left copies of everything. Where would she have hidden them?" "I don't know. She was very secretive about her backup plans." Sarah remembered something Lady Margaret had mentioned. The safety deposit box at Central Bank. The Queen visited it twice in recent months and left instructions for Margaret to access it if something happened. But Margaret is being held by Dr. Henley. Not necessarily. He said he had information about her, not that he had captured her. Maybe she's still free. Sarah called Margaret's phone, praying she would answer. After several rings, Margaret's frightened voice came through. "Detective, thank goodness. I'm hiding in the train station bathroom. There are men looking for me everywhere. Margaret, I need you to listen carefully. Do you have access to the Queen's safety deposit box at Central Bank?" "Yes, she gave me the authorization documents before she died. I need you to go there immediately and retrieve everything. Then take those documents directly to the main police station and demand to speak to the chief commissioner. Tell them it's evidence in the Queen's murder case." "But Detective, what about Officer Crawford?" Sarah made the hardest decision of her career. "I'm going to try to save him, but if something happens to me, you have to promise me you'll get that evidence to the authorities." At 11 p.m., Sarah prepared to meet Dr. Henley at the location he had specified, an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Anna insisted on coming with her despite Sarah's protests. "You'll need a witness to whatever happens," Anna said, "and I've been running from these people for 25 years. It's time to face them." They arrived at the warehouse to find it surrounded by black vehicles. Dr. Henley was waiting inside with several armed men and Officer Crawford, who was bound to a chair but appeared to be unharmed. Dr. Henley was a distinguished-looking man in his early 60s, with silver hair and expensive clothing. He carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to power and control. "Detective Mitchell, Ms. Whitmore, how thoughtful of you both to come. Release Officer Crawford and we'll discuss the documents," Sarah said. "I'm afraid it's not that simple. You see, this situation has become quite complicated. The story you're planning to publish would be devastating to national security interests." "You mean it would be devastating to your career and reputation?" Dr. Henley smiled coldly. "Sometimes those are the same thing. I've spent decades building institutions that protect this country. I won't allow them to be destroyed by ancient history." "Ancient history? You attacked Anna and then murdered the Queen to cover it up. How many other crimes are you responsible for?" "The Queen's death was regrettable but necessary. She had become obsessed with the past and was threatening current operations. As for Ms. Whitmore, her accusations were dealt with appropriately at the time." Anna stepped forward, her fear replaced by anger. "Appropriately? You assaulted me and then paid me to disappear. When I came back, you tried to have me killed." "You should have stayed away," Dr. Henley replied. "Your return created complications that required a response." Sarah noticed that Crawford was trying to signal something with his eyes. Following his gaze, she saw that he had managed to partially free his hands from his restraints. "Dr. Henley, you're finished," Sarah said, stepping closer to create a distraction. By now, Margaret has accessed the Queen's safety deposit box and turned over all the evidence to the authorities. "Even if you kill us, the truth will come out." For the first time, Dr. Henley looked uncertain. "You're bluffing, am I? Check your phone. I think you'll find that the story is about to break in every major newspaper in the country." As Dr. Henley reached for his phone, Crawford broke free from his restraints and tackled one of the armed men. In the ensuing chaos, Sarah and Anna dove for cover while police sirens began wailing in the distance. Lady Margaret had indeed retrieved the evidence from the safety deposit box and had convinced the Chief Commissioner to authorize an immediate raid on the warehouse. The documents from the Queen's vault contained not only evidence of the original cover-up but also detailed records of Dr. Henley's other corrupt activities over the past 2 decades. As police surrounded the building, Dr. Henley realized his situation was hopeless. "This won't end with me," he said as officers placed him under arrest. "There are others who will continue to protect the important work we've been doing." "Maybe," Sarah replied, "but they'll have to do it without you." The story broke across all media outlets exactly at midnight as planned. The headlines were devastating. Royal Guard exposes decades-old conspiracy, Queen murdered to prevent scandal exposure, and top security official arrested in palace fire case. Within days, Dr. Henley and 6 of his associates were charged with multiple crimes including murder, assault, arson, and conspiracy. Anna Whitmore's courage in coming forward inspired other victims to speak out about corruption and cover-ups in various government departments. Officer Crawford recovered fully from his injuries and was commended for his bravery in protecting the Queen and helping to expose the truth. Lady Margaret returned to her position at the palace, where she helped establish new protocols to prevent similar conspiracies in the future. The Queen was posthumously honored for her commitment to justice and her willingness to sacrifice her own safety to ensure that the truth would eventually emerge. A memorial was established in her name to support victims of assault and government corruption. Anna Whitmore finally found the peace she had been seeking for 25 years. With Dr. Henley and his network destroyed, she was able to rebuild her life without fear. She established a foundation to help other victims of powerful predators who had been silenced by money and intimidation. Detective Sarah Mitchell was promoted and assigned to lead a new unit focused on investigating corruption in high-level government positions. The case had shown her that even the most powerful people could be held accountable when brave individuals were willing to stand up for the truth. The Royal Palace implemented sweeping security reforms and established an independent oversight committee to ensure that no future conspiracies could take root within the monarchy's institutions. The Queen's final act of courage had not only exposed past crimes, but had also created safeguards to protect future generations. The case became a landmark example of how ordinary people, a detective, a secretary, a victim, and a journalist, could work together to defeat corruption and bring justice to even the most powerful criminals. The Queen's secrets had finally been revealed, and in that revelation, the truth had set everyone free.